Shabbat Shalom. Happy Friday. Thanks for joining us on Living Waters, Falling Deeper in Love with God's Word. I'm one of your hosts, Lauren Cruz.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Pavlantos. Thanks for joining us in Shabbat Shalom.
And we are actually recording this again. November is turning into a very busy month. So I'm sorry, but we're not live. But we do appreciate you guys joining us. And we did notice that we had a couple of comments last week. Thank you for that and for interacting with our videos. And we just ask that you just continue to leave comments. And we do jump on and look at them throughout the week, and we try to respond. And thank you.
Yes. So we are in Romans chapter 4 today. So whether you have this commentary or not, you can still follow along in your Bible. And we've been already talking about, well, I started a new book and I was telling Lauren about it today, and I'm like, should we do it on here? But Joel Richardson wrote this. This was his first book. It came out in 2006, and then it came out under a new title in 2009. But if you're interested in any of Joel Richardson's books, go to his website, www.joels with an S, not a slash, it's a dash, trumpets.com. So it's a Joel's plural, dash trumpets.com, and he's got under free resources, he has all of his books for free.
It's amazing.
So they're like in PDF format, so if you don't want to have to buy, or listen to an audio, you can pull it up and read it.
Honestly, I wonder, doesn't Word have a way of reading it to you now too? Like if you pull it up with the PDF, you could there might be a way to get Word to read to you. So that's kind of an interesting way of doing it. I have that book on Kindle, and I remember when I purchased it, it was really inexpensive. It was super inexpensive. So I don't think he's in it to, for a profit. I think he's just trying to get the information out.
Yeah. And then I guess his newer one, I don't know when it came out, but it had to come out in the last couple of years or so, but it's on Mount Sinai in Arabia. And it's not where everybody's been going for basically 1,000 years. It's actually not in the same. It's in Saudi Arabia. So it's really interesting. I was telling my sister about that today, but that's a whole nother subject.
Yeah. So Stephanie and I are still going to continue with Romans. We're only in chapter 4, so we have a long way to go. We're thinking, and we'll probably finish out the year with Romans. And, we always look ahead and look for new books that we can try. And, we'll see. We're in the very infant conversations of possibly Revelation, or at least the topics of the book of Revelation. So if you guys have specific things you're interested in, or like, what do you guys want? So got a comment, what you're interested in listening to. And, maybe something we don't have.
Yeah, sorry, but if we do something in Revelation, we were talking about getting multiple books and using them as commentaries and different things, and more, and not just, even maybe compare and contrast the different views. But I have a book that comes from a Hebrew scroll of Revelation, so it basically gives you the Aramaic, the Hebrew, and then the English. So it gives all three translations of different verses in Revelation. So, but then also include stuff like this, include stuff that other people have written about it.
Yeah. So, it's not a verse by verse. Like I don't see us doing like reading it, going verse by verse. But
we can read passages and then talk about those passages and
I don't know. Right. To give us a message, what you guys might be interested in. It's a very heavy topic, but I think it's very applicable to our world today. So who knows?
Yeah, it's good.
All right. Romans 4. Here we go.
Okay, here we go.
Okay. He is he has answered his question. So what good is our faith? And that's kind of how what good is it being a Jew, I guess, is really the question. And he kind of began to answer that at the end of the last chapter. Now, chapter 4, he really gets into it because he really talks about Abraham a lot.
Yeah. So let me just read the last verse of Romans 3.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Romans 3:31. Does it follow that we abolish Torah by this trusting? So meaning putting our faith in Messiah? Heaven forbid. On the contrary, we confirm Torah. So right away, he's basically, there's a lot of verses that sounds like he's conflicted with that, or he's saying the opposite of that, but you have to put it all in the right context, all in the right perspective. He is over and over and over talking to his fellow Jewish brothers and telling them that what they have gotten wrong. Okay, so that's his main point. He is correcting a body of believers in Romans. He's not just talking to a bunch of non-believers. He's talking to a very specific body of believers, which we have said. But he, at the very beginning of chapter 4, the Tom Bradford in this book just writes, Romans chapter 4 is essentially a midrash, an interpretive discussion of Genesis 15:6. So he is going to now talk about Abraham a lot, and he's going to go in even to James and some other passages. But it's a good discussion. But he's explaining. So every chapter depends on the chapter before it, and it's a continuing discussion.
Yeah, so we're continuing. The discussion continues, and he uses Abraham to answer the question and kind of continue. Heaven forbid, or may it never be. Why would probably be the next question. And so here's his answer.
Yeah.
Romans 4:1. Then what should we say? Abraham, our forefather, obtained by his own efforts. So
sorry.
Yeah. So the key, and he says the key word there is by his own efforts, because the whole debate is, do I still have to be obedient? And is my righteousness from my works, or is my righteousness from salvation?
Yeah. And
Paul
because
is really clear, your works are not how you are saved. And but it does still apply. It's like we need air, food, and water. We need salvation, and we need works.
So, and that's a good point that he makes. But again, when you go back to Romans 3:31, he says, do we abolish Torah because now we trust in Jesus? And he says, heaven forbid. But the thing is then how did Abraham, how was he, as this author keeps saying, how was he made righteous? How was he
righteous?
Yeah, how was he righteous? And so he said, so what do we say? Abraham, our forefather, obtained it by his own efforts because Messiah wasn't around yet.
Right.
So he's like, no, he still didn't get it by his own efforts. He still didn't get it by keeping any commandments because the Torah hadn't been written down yet.
Right.
But we know from Galatians that Abraham was given the gospel. Galatians tells us that he was taught the gospel. So that brings up another subject that we'll get to, if not this week, next. Towards the end of Romans 4. But it says, so Paul's going to justify his assertion that trusting faithfulness is what actually confirms the law of Moses and doesn't abolish it. So I'm right at the top of 108. By citing Abraham. And he begins by addressing a standard premise of Judaism that clearly existed then and exists to this day, that is called in Hebrew Zakot Ovot. And it means the merits of the father, which I probably just butchered. So this was the belief that was part of the parcel with the concept that Jewishness itself guaranteed righteousness before God. So just because they were Jewish, they felt they were righteous before God. So that is what he is arguing against.
Right. He has argued against that over and over and over again. He has said that multiple times. Yeah.
So
okay.
Then he kind of goes on. Do you want to go to by his own efforts?
It just says the key phrase in here, because it says in Romans 4:1, it says we should say that Abraham, our forefather, obtained obtained by his efforts. And the key word are by his efforts. In other words, the Jews believed that Abraham was righteous on account of his deeds, and that Abraham's righteousness had a great deal to do with their own righteousness. Okay. It's no. The problem with that is Paul has appealed to Abraham on more than one occasion to prove not only the efficacy of the gospel, but also the law. And Abraham is seen by the church as more connected to Judaism and to Islam. And yet here in the New Testament, Paul shows that the plan of redemption on all accounts is directly connected to Abraham. And so neither can anyone else claim glory for their own deeds. Abraham couldn't claim glory for his own deeds, and nobody else can.
Right.
So it continues. It says, for if Abraham came to be considered righteous by God because of legalistic observances, then he has something to boast about.
Right.
But this is not how it is before God. For what does the Tanakh say? Abraham put his trust in God, and it was credited to him, to his account, righteous. And so he's actually quoting scripture for that, Old Testament scripture.
Yeah, in Genesis 15:6. So what the last thing she just read was Romans 4:2 and 3. So it's probably sounds, because this book quotes the Jewish, right? The complete Jewish scriptures, or complete Jewish Bible.
The complete Jewish Bible. He bounces back and forth between King James Version and that one. So.
Sometimes he throws in the ESV, but I'm just gonna read it. It says, so I said it was 3 and 4. Is that what I said?
3:15. Yeah, Romans 3. Yeah, Romans 4. I'm sorry, Romans 4, 2 and 3.
Yeah, no, you're fine. I'm going to read Romans 4, 2 and 3 because just how it's different. For if Abraham was justified by works, he has something to boast about, but not before God. For what does the scripture say? Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. So I don't think that's real different, actually.
It's not actually different.
It's a little, it seemed like it was a little shorter than what was here. But yeah, so if Abraham was righteous by God because of his works, then certainly he would have had something to brag about. Right. But Abraham put his trust in God, and God credited this trust as Abraham's righteousness. So.
Right. And again, it's that same idea we were talking about last week. He trusted God. He trusted God, like what God is saying, just like we trust Yeshua's faith. So he's trusting God's faith, God's faithfulness, God's righteousness.
And then pretty soon here, he actually gives the biblical meaning of faith and the biblical meaning of faithfulness.
Yeah.
I thought really eye-opening.
It's different. Yeah. One's a verb and one's a noun.
Yeah. So he says Paul was disagreeing with the standard Jewish beliefs of that day. So because they still believed they were righteous before God, just because, and he even brings this up in a little bit, but even because they were circumcised. That was a major thing. And so when you think of like the uncircumcised or the circumcised group, that in some, like the ESV, it will call them that, and they'll argue with Peter and they'll argue with Paul for going to uncircumcised people. It was a huge thing to be circumcised. And that's why Paul makes a big deal about it. He goes, it's about circumcision of the heart, not the flesh.
Right. And it's such a big deal. I think he even made this in the book, that the uncircumcised in Rome, in Roman time, were called barbarians. So it's just not just a way of saying the Gentiles. Like if you were not a Jew, you were considered a barbarian. So and it was similar to how Islam considers anybody not within their ranks of a barbarian. So it's really interesting, but you have to keep it all in context, and that's why we do recommend this book, because he is great about keeping the Jewishness of Paul and his understanding of the Torah and the Tanakh, Right.
the Hebrew scriptures, all in order with what he's writing in Romans. And that's the main thing. I mean, I just actually heard, do you know who David Wilbur is? Who's from 119 Ministries.
Mm-hmm.
So he was talking, and he there was a pastor talking about how the Old Testament is insignificant. The New Testament has taken its place, just like everything else. Like, he was just going on about different things that are no longer, it's not important anymore because the New Testament, just like we tried to put the new covenant above every other covenant, but no covenant can be done away with except through death. And that would mean God would have to die, not us. So he was just, I was blown away what this guy was explaining. And he's explaining it just like you and I are talking. He's just like so matter of fact about it. And this is what's, you have to understand that has been done away with. That Old Testament doesn't matter anymore. It's only about the New Testament. And we can't start thinking that way. Or the verse in Hebrews 13 that says Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever doesn't mean anything. So
well, and so what did the early church look at? Like, what scriptures did the early church look at then?
The Old
There
Testament.
was no New Testament. The New Testament came 80 years after Christ. 40 years after Christ.
Yeah.
And
or they read the letters from Paul or from the disciples that they passed around, but they were still the scrolls were what they studied.
And if that's the case, then why does the New Testament quote so much of the Old Testament?
Yeah.
Even what we just read in Romans 4:2-3, it's a quote of Genesis.
And he shows it here in this book. He puts it in bold everywhere that the Old Testament is being spoken of. Yeah, quoted. That's the right word. So it's important to understand that it's quoted. And I, when we did the Lost in Translation book, he actually said 90% of our Bibles that we read today, 90% of this book right here is Old Testament. 90%, because even when it's not quoted, he's still using parts of a verse that we think of a verse to make an argument out of, or to to win an argument with, whatever. So he's not making this stuff up. He's bringing it out of Torah. He's bringing it out of the prophets. He's bringing it out of the Psalms.
So I'm just flipping back here. This is a super quick count. Super quick. Because I just looked for the bolded time 6 times already. We're only in chapter 4. And if I counted right, I might have mixed things up, but 5 or 6 times in 4 chapters, Paul has already quoted the Old Testament. So, yeah.
And he quotes it twice between Romans 1 and Romans 8. I mean, I'm sorry, Romans 4:1 and 4:8. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's in there a lot. All right. Anything in there? Okay, what I have in here, it said the point that Paul is trying to make is that the law didn't yet exist in Abraham. So this is something else too. I told this to my husband, and he's like, that never dawned on me. Abraham was not a Christian. Abraham was not a Jew. He was a Gentile man from another country that came to the promised land. He wasn't even circumcised, and he wouldn't be circumcised for years. I mean, years. So he was uncircumcised for a very long time while he was a follower. So it said the point is that making that the law didn't exist in Abraham's day. It wouldn't for another 6 centuries. 600 years after Abraham is when the law finally came. So it can't be by doing works of the law that God saw Abraham as righteous. Rather, if any work was involved, the work was merely that of trusting. Trusting. So,
in Second Temple Judaism, it was believed that Abraham was righteous before God because of his deeds. But again, that's the wrong understanding. And we've even said, why did Jesus go to the Jews? Because he wanted to correct their issues. He didn't come in flesh to his people because he was doing away with all the Torah. He came to his people to set them straight so that they could tell the rest of the world. And that's what we actually, I think, forget a lot of the times, that they were the first missionaries.
Yeah. He gave them the message of the gospel, which it's hard to wrap our brain around that, but that's what he gave it. And by the time Yeshua came to the earth, it had been so distorted and changed and not holy. It became man's tradition. And so if he's going to continue that message, it had to be corrected.
Yeah.
So,
and all 12 disciples went around the earth, basically what the earth was at that time to them, telling of the gospel of Jesus and of Yeshua, So it's important to understand that they were in charge of the gospel first. So they were taking it right from Yeshua, Messiah, to everybody else. But yet the church changed things and we have almost a different gospel.
Right. All right. Romans 4:4-5. Now the account of someone whose working is credited not on the ground of grace, but on the ground of what is owed him. However, in the case of one who's not working, but rather is trusting in him who makes ungodly people righteous, his trust is credited to him as righteousness. This is hard for some people to listen to. But Paul is saying your work is not what credits you as grace, but it's your trust.
And it says in my ESV, justifies, it uses the word. So they use the word trust instead of justified.
Right.
Because we talked about this. It's not our faith that saves us, because our faith is up and down, and sideways and everything, and sometimes gone and sometimes strong. So it's not trusting in our own faith. It's trusting in the faithfulness of Messiah.
Right.
So just as a reminder. So, so I just have this right before. If a person does not work but merely trust in God to make people who are not godly into people who are righteous, then that person has earned nothing and is owed nothing. The trust or the faith that you might have here that they have in God is simply imputed to them by God as righteousness. What that person received was not owed to him. It was given as a favor or a gift.
Right, a gift. Yeah.
And that goes back to Abraham again, because Abraham didn't do anything to deserve what he was given. He was given a covenant, made a covenant with him before he was even circumcised. And before he would even had any understanding of even having to sacrifice his own son, a covenant was already made with him. And that covenant is what's renewed. So anyway.
All right. Romans 4:6-8. In the same way, the blessings which David pronounces is on those whom God credits with righteousness apart from the legalistic observances. And here we go. We're quoting the Old Testament again. Blessed are those who transgress are forgiven, whose sins are covered over. Blessed is the man whose sin Adonai will not reckon against his account. So again, we're quoting, it says, let's see if I can read Psalm 32. And he actually gave us the whole, it's a lot. I don't want to read the whole thing, but David is definitely quoting, there's a lot in Psalms that definitely, yeah.
I have highlighted down at the bottom third of it, I will instruct and teach you in this way that you are to go.
I have in the way you are to go. I have that underlined. And I wrote Torah next to it.
Yeah, because that's
exactly. If you're receiving instruction and teaching, that is Torah. That is Torah.
So when it says that here, and when it says it, train up your child in the way they are to go, it's all about Torah.
Right.
That is the teaching or the training that the author is speaking of.
Right.
It says, I will give you counsel. My eyes will be watching you. Many are the torments of the wicked, but grace surrounds those who trust in Adonai.
So I looked it up. And I love this. Okay, I looked it up in my Bible, and it says, many are the torments of the wicked, but loving kindness surrounds those who trust.
Is it
it's the word chen, CHEN.
Okay.
Chen. That is the word grace, and it's also often translated as loving kindness. But I'm telling you, when you read the word grace, that sure does give it a different emphasis. It definitely helps you understand that a little bit better.
So this was I got to look that up too now.
Psalms 32. Yep, and I marked it in my Bible as well because it's a different word, and I think it definitely changes the way that could be interpreted.
I need Bible Hub there. I like Bible Hub.
It says many are this is a NASB.
But steadfast love.
It says many are the sorrows of the wicked who trusts in the Lord. Loving kindness shall surround him. So it's flipped a little bit, and loving kindness is the word chen, which is great.
It's chesed. So it's actually so it's CHESED.
Yes.
And so that is the word actually, if you remember when we read the book Eden. Oh my goodness, I've forgotten. The something in Eden. But anyway, she went through all the covenants, but that word means covenant loyalty. Covenant loyalty. Whenever we think of mercy or steadfast love, because some people use that as loving kindness, but it's that word, again, chesed, like a CH sound.
Yeah.
But it's merciful, kindness, mercy, pity, but it's almost always meaning covenant loyalty. And I think that's interesting because that's exactly what God saw in David, which is why he chose him to be king, because he had a covenant loyalty, the same covenant loyalty that God himself had for David. So he just goes on. So Paul uses this Psalm of David to make a key point that God forgives and gives righteousness to those who have sinned. So, and yet people who have sinned do not deserve forgiveness, but God imputes or reckons no guilt to the sinner. Thus, righteousness could in turn be given to that sinner who God now no longer sees as a sinner. And then this is where I'm at the top of 111. Right. But that's where he goes on actually about the way you are to go is referring to the law of Moses or the Torah.
Yeah, it says it says going the way one is to go does not cause righteousness. Going the way one is to go and receiving righteousness are two different things. So, and he says a little bit further down, he says, grace is not a New Testament innovation. So, I mean, grace isn't, we just read it in the Psalms. The word grace is in there. So it's not a New Testament. The law was grace because God gave Israel a way to atone for their trespasses and return to peace with him, which didn't involve a human trespasser losing their own life, nor did it involve them earning their way back to God's good graces. So even the whole sacrificial system is grace.
Yeah, it was based on grace in action because God didn't want to throw his wrath on them. So the perfect little lamb or perfect little kid goat, paid the price for that person could not pay. Right. And I thought this was good. He would accept the blood of sinless animals to pay for the sins of the guilty human beings who owed him the debt of their own blood. Grace versus law, as it's often framed in Christianity, is an oxymoron. So it is not grace versus law. It's grace and law. So we can have both. You can have your cake and eat it too. You can have grace.
It's gluten free.
So
now let's see. We're at Romans. We're moving right along here.
We
Romans
are.
4, 9 through 10. Now is the blessing for the circumcised only? Okay, we're going back to that question. Or is it also for the uncircumcised? For we say that Abraham's trust was credited to his account as righteousness. But what state was he in? It was so credited, circumcision or uncircumcision, not in circumcision, but in uncircumcision, exclamation point.
Yeah.
So he's making the point, Abraham received grace and his credit to him as righteousness before he was circumcised.
Right.
So the circumcision doesn't give you any special.
No.
And
again, that is what Paul in his books is repeating over and over and over. That's why in Galatians, he's like, hey, don't stop. Just like do the whole thing, because he's like, it doesn't matter how much I'm not trying to be like weird or sick, but, it doesn't matter how much you take off. It's not going to get you into heaven. It's not about circumcision. It's about the circumcision of the heart. That is this point over and over and over, that it's not about the physical circumcision, but that's what they believed. That's what they were told and taught to believe.
That's right. Okay.
Page 112. I have it here.
Okay.
And you actually said it, that there at the top, he was righteous before he was officially a Hebrew. He was righteous because he trusted God. And then I just had at the end of Romans 2, true circumcision of the heart. It is spiritual and not literal, so that this praise comes not from other people, but from God. So.
Yeah, the only thing I had, it also proves something that has been arguing, that he has been arguing since chapter 1. Since Abraham received righteousness from God long before the law ever existed, then it cannot be that it is the law that is the vehicle to receive righteousness. Even more, it's a circumcision. Circumcision was not given as a sign of Jewishness. It was given as a sign and seal that one has a trusting faithfulness in God.
Yeah.
So it's not even
look different.
Yeah. It was a sign. It was a symbol of your trusting God.
And
go ahead.
So do you want to read the next one? Let me add, because I was going to quote some of that. Go ahead.
I had one other section down at the bottom. It says it continues in full force, and that's because the purpose is especially important to believers. It's needed to show us why do we need it? Why do we need it? It's needed to show us what pleases God and what is sin. Why do we need the law? Like why? And why do we need it? So, okay. What did you want me to read?
Well, I was just starting there at let me add, not only did the way of receiving righteousness was revealed through Abraham, but it is that deliverance or salvation that came upon Israel before they received the Torah on Mount Sinai. It happened purely by God's grace. He and he alone fought Egypt through supernatural plagues. We all know that. So here we have further proof that doing the law is only something for people who have already been redeemed. It's not a means of redemption. So this is the point that Lauren and I are making. We're not like bad law. Ooh, bad. We're not doing that. We're saying we do it out of our love because he's redeemed us. We keep his word. We keep what he wrote in this book. We keep it because of what he's done for us, because he's redeemed us, because he's made us righteous. And that is a way that we then show our love through obedience in keeping his word. So, but the last thing there, and yet to Paul, the law is not at all dead and gone, nailed to the cross. It continues in full force. And that is because its purpose is especially important to believers. It is needed to show us what pleases God and what sin is.
Right. That's what I read. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I just I didn't know where you were.
No,
So
it's okay. I think it's a good point to be made. So here's the thing. I attend a church, and I still attend a church, and I'm still very much involved with the church body. It's just the way things are. And my question for them is, how is anybody to know you're a Christian? How would anybody know you're a believer in Yeshua? Well, I act better. I try to treat people better. I try to, because everybody, even in the New Testament, we have an understanding that we're supposed to live and act differently. We're supposed to live by a different standard. I don't know.
Set apart. So it means
we're supposed to be set apart. How would anybody know we're set apart? And that's a hard thing to answer for a Christian. The only thing I can say is, I try to treat people differently. I try to speak about Christ as often as I can. I try to be loving and sharing and all of that. Mm-hmm. The only difference between them and me, and I'm not saying this is any better, we got to eat together a lot. We eat a lot, right? At church, we eat a lot. Mm-hmm. And almost every opportunity they ask, why don't you eat pork? Or why aren't you eating the fried rice with shrimp in it? And that's how I can be set apart. That's how, and that opens up a whole, what does it mean? What do you mean you're Torah pursuant? What do you, that's a whole conversation. Right. There's nothing, what do you mean you're taking the feast off? I don't understand that. So I have ways to separate myself from society that are going to spur conversations, even criticisms, and that's fine. Yeah. Whereas a standard person, if I just lived standard by the Christian faith and doctrine and everything else, there's nothing I do that's going to look any different from the world. Mm-hmm.
You mind if I read a little bit what I was reading to you? Because it kind of goes along with what you're saying, because there's this woman, young woman, I think she was only 29 at the time that this was written. But she converted to Islam. She was raised in the church, parents who were Christians, the whole 9 yards. This is her quote: "I went to church, I went to parties, but I wasn't concerned about heaven or hell. I just took it all for granted." Mm-hmm. She got a job. She met a Muslim. He started wanting to debate with her. She said it made her rethink her Christian faith, but she studied the Bible, but also Islam, in order to do a better job at defending her faith. Instead, she became intrigued that Muslims prayed 5 times a day, fasted, and gave alms as a way of life. She goes, I was not that kind of Christian. So think of this. How many people, I'm not talking about tithing and all of that, because there's different beliefs on that. Mm-hmm. But it's still giving to God. So you can give to your neighbor. You can give to somebody who comes to your door and says, hey, we have a family member that needs help. That is giving to those who need it. But there's a lot of believers that don't give anything to anybody. Okay. They fasted. They prayed. And she's like, I didn't do any of those things. And I was a Christian. Mm-hmm. She said, when I was a Christian, and I never understood why Jesus had to die for my sins. And
I don't understand that. Yeah.
That grew up in the church. And
that's scary. That's scary.
So she said, before becoming a Muslim, she visited a Christian minister. She asked why Christians ate pork. Mm-hmm. Because now you understand Muslims don't, because they get it. They get that whole thing of what's clean and what isn't clean. Mm-hmm. Why women didn't cover their heads in church, and why Christians dated. And she says, I wanted him to defend the Bible. I gave him everything that I had found wrong with Christian interpretation, but his answers did not satisfy her, because he went back on the whole line again. Mm-hmm. It's all been changed. Mm-hmm. It's all been abolished. Mm-hmm. Well, it doesn't say that in the Old Testament, that it's been abolished. So I think it's important that these very things about even eating pork are causing people to stumble. And not.
Stephanie, have you seen? There's a girl on TikTok. She's calling churches, and she's playing a sound in the background of a baby crying, and she's calling churches, and she's just saying, hey, I have run out of money to buy formula. My baby hasn't eaten since last night. The baby's screaming in the background on a recording. Can you help me in some way? And church after church after church says no.
Yeah.
She did get assistance from the Islam temple.
Yeah.
They helped
Somebody
her.
asked me, actually said, go try Islam temple.
They
They'll
did.
help you. And I saw another woman who was taping as she was talking to two women. One was the church secretary, and one, I don't know who the other one was. She didn't know. But she had a car. She parked it in their parking lot, and she slept in her car because she was homeless. And they were going to call the police on her and make her leave. And she's taping it. She goes, is this really what you want to say? And they started taping her, and they were just like, you need to leave before we call the police. She goes, go ahead and call the police. She goes, go ahead and keep taping this so people can see what kind of church you are.
Right.
I'm not asking for anything. I just want to park my car
in a safe place.
Somewhere that's I can just sleep and without being told to move.
Right.
It's really bad. It's just we're losing. And I'm not saying every church out there is this way.
And that right. I know. And there are benevolence funds, and there are ways to doing it, you know. I mean, I've had a young woman come into a Sunday school class that I was teaching, never been in our church before, sat down, gave everybody a very sad story. Everybody emptied their pockets for her. She took off. She was a grifter.
Yeah.
You know, and she never came back, and I offered to go pick her up next week. I went and knocked on her door to bring her to church the next Sunday, and she never answered the door. So, I mean,
there are people like that, but
there are.
This woman wasn't even asking for money. She just wanted to park in the parking lot.
Right. And I think there's a way to assist and to do what we should be doing. You know, there's a lot more. I think instead of worrying about having a trunk or treater, holiday trunk or treat, whatever, why don't we use that money for food baskets or whatever, whatever.
I know.
That would show that we're separated and we're set apart.
This is how James describes religion. This is James 1, verse 27. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God, the Father, is this: to visit orphans and widows in their affliction and to keep oneself unstained by the world. And when you were talking earlier, I was thinking to myself, it's like being set apart. Most Christians use all sorts of 4-letter curse words in their everyday talk. I once asked a woman, because she talked like a sailor, but I went to church with her, and she claimed to know Jesus and everything. And so, I do believe she is a Christian. So don't get me wrong. I believe she is, but I think that I'm like, is that how you pray? Would you use those same words when you kneel down to pray to your Lord? She goes, well, no. And I'm like, then why do you use them? The divorce rate, the abuse rate, all these things are the same in the church as it is on the outside in the world.
Right.
This is a problem. There's no holiness, but this book tells us how to be holy.
Right.
And we say, no, we don't need to follow those.
Yeah. And it's not going to make us righteous, but it needs to show us what pleases God and what is sin.
Yeah, that's the two main things. It's not making us more righteous, right? But it's showing us how to live in God's kingdom, just like the Beatitudes show us how to live in God's kingdom.
Yeah.
And but so I think it's important that we talk about it, because I think that we need to be more holy. And I think that's why people are going and leaving churches in droves, because there's, we have children who don't even continue going to church that they've been raised in. They totally leave the faith because they see hypocrisy. They see those things, and they're really astute to this. Our children know when we're a hypocrite.
Yeah.
And it's important. And I think that I don't know. I think it's just something that I've been thinking a lot about in the last few months. So, yeah. Anyway, that's a whole nother subject. But
I understand. All right. We are up to 11. And I think I just In fact, he received circumcision as a sign, as a seal of the righteousness that he had been credited on the grounds of the trust while he was still uncircumcised. So again, he's making that a reference, like he was credited, he was given he was righteous before any circumcision was performed and any law was given. And
yeah, because this is Abraham he's referencing.
Right. Abraham trusted. He was given it to him because it trusted. This happened so that he could be the father of every uncircumcised person who turns and thus has righteousness credited to him.
Who trusts.
It's interesting. Who is the gospel for? The whole world. Yes, they came to the Jews first. God wanted to use them as the example and wanted to set up his kingdom here on earth through them.
Yeah, first missionaries. Yeah.
Right. But it's for the uncircumcised as well. That's one of the ways that we can say we can be children of Father Abraham, because Father Abraham received his righteousness before there was even circumcision. So yes. Yeah.
I just had that next paragraph all highlighted. It's real short.
Go ahead.
This is Romans 4:11. Thus in Romans 4:11, Paul says that God righteoused Abraham before he was circumcised, what you said, so that Abraham could be counted as the father of the unrighteous. Fighting words, to be sure, to the Jews of Rome, but Paul's use of the Holy Scriptures and logic is impeccable. So this would have caused problems between he and the Jews, which we see in Scripture. There were problems, and that's why problems were caused between Jesus and the Pharisees and Paul and the Pharisees, because you had this circumcised group, or what I think I grew up hearing they were Judaizers, but that word is not in Scripture. That's just, I don't even know where that comes from, but they were basically Pharisees who believed that you had to be circumcised in order to conform or to convert to Judaism so you could be saved. And he's like, no, that is not what saves us.
So is that, okay, I'm trying to think, is it Hillel or
Halakha? So
yeah, there were two different houses of Pharisees.
Shammai and Hillel.
Yeah, the Shammai and the Hillel. And I don't want to get it wrong, but one of them believed if you didn't get circumcised at your conversion, then you were not truly converted.
That was Shammai.
That's the whole debate in Galatians. We'll get to that one.
Yeah, that is a whole debate, and that's why when we start taking things out of context, because we don't realize that Paul's talking to Jews. So and the Hillel believed that a non-Jewish person could be saved,
and Paul was part of the Hillel sect.
Right.
So that's important to know too, because he did believe that non-Jews could be saved and could be righteous.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. This, I don't know. I don't really want to go into all this, because the next chunk, he really takes a turn and he starts to compare the book of James with what Paul wrote.
Yeah,
because James quotes, or actually Paul and James use the same passage. They both quote Genesis 3:15, I believe. No, that's not right. That's not the right verse. But they both quote that Abraham had faith in God and it was credited to him as righteousness. They both quote that scripture. And so the next section is talking about the two, talking about what James writes and what Paul writes.
So I'll just read this one. Sorry.
You had a point, though, about James, the book of James, that you had mentioned before we came on.
Oh, we have to remember when James was written. And James was written in like around 44 AD.
Before Romans.
Yeah, it was written before Paul, before Romans, before Acts. It was first. It was before all the Gospels. So because James was the head of the church, so to speak, the synagogue in Jerusalem, he started writing about how you behave, you know, and he just started talking about living out your faith through your works.
Mm-hmm.
So he just says here, and I'm just going to read a little bit.
Go ahead.
So while so far Paul has asserted that the Father will righteous people or justify them on account of trust in Yeshua as Lord and Messiah, he really has not proved this to be the case according to Scripture, meaning the Old Testament, because there was no New Testament when he was having these arguments.
Right.
The core of Paul's argument is that people, both Jews and Gentiles, can only be righteous by an abiding trust in Yeshua's deed, or, his work of going to the cross, and not by the works or deeds of following the law of Moses. But he says, most importantly, this applies to both Jews and Gentiles.
Right.
So that's kind of how he's leading into it. But and he just says this put him in a head-on collision. According to Christians, it puts him on a head-on collision with James, the brother of Yeshua. So we're not going to, like you said, we don't need to get into that today. But you have to understand there's a lot of people who see, and he even, didn't we talk? Oh, he even says that Luther was not a fan of James, and he not denounced it, but
kind of did, because everything that Luther said was it's grace alone, nothing, no deeds. Because he was really criticizing the Catholic Church and all the penance and everything.
Yeah.
But part of Luther's stance stemmed from the fact that he was basically anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
And thus the book of James was a bit too Jewish for his liking.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I've even I know people who are in hyper dispensationalism, and they only, sorry, my dogs are howling. I'm like, what is that sound?
I don't hear them. Yeah, we don't hear them.
But they only read from Romans to Philemon, and the problem with that is that they don't realize that Paul is talking to a lot of Jews in those books. Right. He is having an argument with like this Jewish straw man, and so you don't understand the context. You're not going to understand what he's saying, and if you don't understand what he's saying, you're not going to apply it correctly to your life. So it's a big problem when we don't understand the words that are being spoken, and what they mean. So, so I think of people like that who won't even read anything that is by a Jewish man,
right?
Because we have been taught that Paul converted. So
the whole New Testament is written by Jews. I wanted to leave this. So this is a very important verse. He talked about what is the purpose of the law, and it's needed to show up what pleases God and what sin is. And if you look at 1 John 3, verse 4, it says, whoever commits sin transgress also the law, for sin is the transgression of the law. So a lot of people are, it misses the mark. Okay, misses the mark of what? Misses the mark of the law. So it is very much clarified in the New Testament. That's the New Testament passage.
Yeah, and being lawless is actually being rebellious.
Yeah.
So when we are actually being rebellious, because if you go and you look up the words, because in Hebrew there are 3 different words for sin, and the worst one is rebellion. So I'm not going to get into all that right now, but and so there are times that even Jesus accuses the Pharisees of being lawless. And then he says that, on that day, many will come to me and say, Lord, didn't we do great things in your name? Didn't we speak in tongues? Didn't we, raise people from the dead? And what is he going to say? I do not know you. Go away, you workers of lawlessness. And so we have to understand that is a rebellion. And we may not realize we're being rebellious, but we are. When we start, as I heard somebody actually tell me once, you're thinning the Bible. You're taking stuff out and making this book thinner.
That's a good way to say that.
Yeah. Because she accused me of thinning the Bible. And I'm like, no, I'm not taking out the first 5 books of the Bible.
Right.
I'm not taking out parts of Acts. I'm not taking out parts of James or Peter or whatever,
Or
so.
Rome. Yeah, or Romans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's really important that we don't thin the Bible. We read it all.
Mm-hmm.
So because it was all around.
Okay. So. I don't know how much more you want to go. We can probably do another. Let's see. James. Yeah, the next chunk really goes into James. Okay, so I would suggest if you're following along with us, we are up to Romans 4:11, and he inserts James 2:14 through 26. So I don't want to read the whole thing. I guess we could. We probably have a little bit of time, but
about 1 minute. But the one thing I would like to just read. Bottom of 115 before Romans 2. Sure. He repeats Romans 2.
Sure.
It just says, in reality, Paul says, because some people hearing this aren't going to maybe see us next week, but in reality, Paul says that while God's righteousness righteous us according to our trust, the law remains alive and well, and that it goes without saying that properly doing the provisions of the law or deeds remains paramount in the life of a believer.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's important. Paul is not canceling the law, not canceling the obedience of the law. He's very, very clear. It does not save us. But how is anybody going to know? They'll know we are Christians by our love. Yes, I understand that. But
we have to be set apart. And it's even how you treat your neighbor. I mean, okay. When he says that the whole Torah or all the commandments sit on, love your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself, sits on that. That means everything in those commandments, everything in the Torah tells us those two things.
Yeah. That
all hangs on that. So.
It does. All right. Well, I've lost my voice.
Sorry.
No, we're out of time. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for joining us.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for joining us.
Appreciate it. If you missed today's show and want to watch it again or want to tell someone where they can watch this episode, go to lambnetwork.tv, where you will find this show and all of the other live Lamb show archives on the on-demand section of the website. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to tell someone about the Messianic Lamb Network.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussions, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the lambnetwork.tv website. I'm Stephanie Pavlantos, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.